Welcome to CIHT Podcasts.
Welcome to this CIHT podcast. I'm your host, Justin Ward, and today we are looking at the new UK Roads Liaison Group Asset Management Competency Framework. I'm with John Paterson from Atkins, a member of the SNC Lavalin Group, who is the lead consultant who developed the framework with leadership provided on behalf of the sector by the UK Roads Liaison Group Asset Management Board. John, welcome. Can you explain just a bit about what this new framework does?
Thank you, Justin. This framework, it really responds to demand from the sector. Certainly with the publication of the Code of Practice in 2016 and the move for authorities to be adopting that, UKRLG had been engaging with the sector and as part of the feedback there and some of the feedback we've been picking up through engaging with individual authorities and regional groups as well, was there's a real sort of clear desire for additional support regarding skills and competencies. So very much this framework has been developed with the Asset Management Board from the UKRLG, support from the Department for Transport and Transport for London, and it aligns with the Code of Practice, other good practice such as that coming from the Institute of Asset Management and the international standard itself as well, ISO 55000.
And there's quite a breadth of roles covered within the competence framework. Can you just explain some of these roles and why they were included? Some
of the roles that are included in there are probably not going to be any great surprise in an asset management competence framework. Asset management leadership and asset management delivery, inspections are touched on, but something we've noted in there is that certainly for asset-specific inspections, guidance is available that drills down into more of the defined requirements for that. We have, however, also included, as well as some of those direct roles involved in asset management, a couple of areas that we have sort of built in includes flagging up the political and senior decision maker role. That is whether it may be contested whether that's a direct or indirect role, but it certainly is a vital one and has a great bearing on how effectively asset management can be enabled and implemented. And by including them within the framework, there's not, it's not like a hugely demanding set of competencies there, but it does sort of, provide an active reminder that they do need to have awareness or knowledge of certain areas that they have a great impact on. One other role that we have flagged up in here is regarding risk, legal and insurance. And those sort of three functions were something that were, covered quite broad, quite widely when we're reviewing the code and in the subsequent implementation of it. So very much it's a case of, again, making sure that they're not seen as a separate entity aside from the highways service, but certainly someone, those are functions that should be really, really embraced and embedded within the way of working for asset management.
How do we define the levels of competence in the framework?
Well, we've defined the competence levels using an industry standard approach in terms of various levels, starting off with awareness. So that's where the practitioner is aware of the competence but hasn't practiced it. Moving onwards to knowledge, where they're capable of contributing to the work of others, but not of undertaking that independently. We then move up to experience, where they're capable of undertaking that competence independently, and ultimately proficiency as the highest level, and where they're not only able to undertake it independently, but manage, supervise and advise others.
And there are a number of competence areas. Could you just explain a bit more about these and how they link to the job roles?
Sure. So we have 10 competence themes, which can range from, should we say, almost areas such as legislation and procurement, through to more, shall we say, asset management, traditional areas such as governance, policy and strategy, information and data, and so on. But it also includes some of the softer elements such as customer and communications. So there's those 10 themes. They're laid out in the guidance, as I've said, that's available freely on the UKRLG website. And within that, there's 43 individual competencies, which can sound quite, potentially as though there's quite a few there to look at. However, what we've also done is we've defined requirements into a number of individual roles associated with asset management. as well as also providing a minimum level that we would expect to see across an authority, in a broad, high-level perspective.
And the framework has an Excel tool within it. Can you just explain what the Excel tool does and how that will help authorities?
It's available online alongside the guidance, freely available. There's two versions of it, one in Excel 2007 and another in 2016. Obviously, the later edition has a little bit more functionality in terms of some of the reporting, but obviously we're aware of compatibility issues with authorities, thus we've produced it in 2007 as well. The underlying fundamental principles behind each are precisely the same. What it does is it gives authorities either the opportunity to track their competence at an individual level, and that can be defined as a number of specific roles that we've identified that contribute to asset management, or equally as a local authority level, really understanding the level of competence throughout the organisation. And some of that might also actually include competencies that are available to them through their supply chain partners.
And you mentioned identifying training gaps and requirements. How does the framework actually support authorities in determining what could be done in certain areas?
Well, certainly coming at it from an individual perspective, by looking at an individual's role of the function they're performing, we can see the competence levels against each of those that are identified as being a requirement for that role. From their self-assessment, you can then see, okay, and this is something that the Excel tool is very good at, because there's the presentation of the results with various visualizations that help you identify where those gaps are, and then by looking at those gaps, there's potential ways to either to develop it. There's suggestions within the actual framework itself regarding formal training or informal training, such as on-the-job stuff, and also evidence that might be that's come from your experience. And actually, I'd just like to clarify that it's not just about filling in gaps. Actually, this training and improvement, that should be seen as something as just good practice in terms of continual professional development.
There'll be a number of benefits from doing this.
Well, the benefits, there's a number of benefits here that we expect authorities and individuals can realise from using the framework. First of all, it's really to identify, what levels of, what competence should they have for the role they are doing, and certainly if there's needs for training or support or personal development, how that can be, identified and how that can be justified. It also helps understand the level of competence across the authority. So certainly, sometimes it's been a case of authorities know the skills and competencies they've got within their immediate team, but for such a broad service that needs a lot of different skills going into it, it really can pay dividends to understand what else is out there within the authority itself. There still may be issues with regards to accessing that and availability, but it really does, it provides, should we say, more intellectual assets that the authority might hold that it doesn't know it holds in the first place. There's also another couple of, I suppose, personal benefits as well. So in terms of how that helps people justify and evidence their own progress, it really helps support those personal development plans and progression and hopefully recognition. And not only the skills and competencies that are there within the authority at the moment, it also can help provide a bit of focus on succession planning and levels of resilience in some of those competence areas.
So would you see this as now the code, well-managed highway infrastructure, is now in place, authorities have to be following it, that this is really something that they have to look at to become compliant with the code?
Well, it's got its guidance and good practice. It's not a mandatory requirement, but certainly in terms of good practice, it's there. It's freely available for authorities to use. It's a case of this is providing benefits to the number of levels that we talked about earlier, and as I say, in terms of how authorities should be, should we say, assured in terms of their adoption of the code of practice. Again, something from our risk, legal and insurance colleagues, something that had come up from them was perhaps in terms of, should we say, challenging court, it would probably be we would expect the first area to be in terms of, well, what processes did you have in place? why did you select them, and have you got evidence that you followed them? So I think there's probably been quite a lot of focus on that from many authorities and practitioners. But beyond that, the second line of challenge that have been identified by some of those professionals was that it would then focus in on individual people, resources within the asset management sphere, and who made those decisions, and were they competent to either make those decisions rather, or do those actions. So again, this helps provide that assurance on that level, as well as all the inherent value of having a better skilled and competent workforce.
Thank you. That was an interview with John Paterson from Atkins, a member of the SNC Lavalin Group.